Good morning. Hope you're doing good. So, I want to share some thoughts this morning about judgment. And I'm certainly no expert, and I'm certainly not a theologian or any kind of professional in that sense, but this is just my humble offerings for you based on what I feel like God put on my heart this morning. Okay. So, I think that this kind of thinking that I'm going to share with you all comes to those of us who feel misunderstood just naturally. I think about Jesus. Jesus surely felt very misunderstood. He was misunderstood. He was constantly having to explain and re-explain in parables, and all of his teachings. He would he would often say, "Again, I tell you." He would just have to re-emphasize, and I can just imagine how frustrating that would be, But one of the main things that I think sometimes maybe we just forget is where he said, "Let the first without sin, or let the one without sin cast the first stone." And that's a pretty serious warning. And I think that we can haphazardly, we can accidentally find ourselves in a position of judging another person. And I'm not talking about gossip. I'm talking about just within our own mind, okay? And what I want us to consider, is to strive to be more conscious of this process within our own mind. So, if you think about it, if we're engaging with another person in any kind of capacity whatsoever, a romantic relationship, a spouse, a family member, a friend, someone at work, anyone at all, if the relationship is a struggle, or if the relationship is going downhill, if it feels negative, if it feels stressful to us, I think that our natural tendency is to first assume there's something wrong either with the other person or with us, and that's going to depend on our background. If we have a background of feeling like we're always the problem, then our first tendency is going to go to, well, okay, what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong in this relationship? But if you don't have that kind of background, your tendency may be to judge the other person. Either way, there's judgment coming into the equation. It's kind of like an easy mental solution to, and I think we're always searching for a logical answer, right? And what's that old saying? I don't remember. I'll drop it in the description if I can think of it later, but it's something about the simplest answer is usually the right one, or something like that. And I don't know that I agree with that. So, even if a person, be it you or the other person, is wrong in a situation, there's so much more behind that we don't understand, we don't even know. Even if it's us, even if it's within us. Otherwise, people wouldn't have to go to therapists and do a lot of digging and work on becoming conscious of themselves. I mean, otherwise, in psychology, there wouldn't be the concept of the subconscious, So, and that reminds me also of where Jesus said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." So, so here's what came to me this morning. I think that sometimes we can default to finding fault in another person because there's this, I guess you might say, stigma, these really strong beliefs around fault. And, if you just look at religious systems, and the concept of sin, and I'm not saying that's not real and true. I'm just speaking about the impact on our mind, okay, and how this plays out in our life. I think that we can have such an aversion to the concept of sin, and we don't want to be sinful, even though there's a whole lot more to that through the Christian lens, but I'll kind of just leave that there for you to contemplate and dig into, okay? But this is the whole mistake right here that we can find ourselves in, is thinking that we can get it right somehow, or the other person should get it right somehow, okay? And be sinless. So if there's a situation, a tense situation, a negative situation, I think sometimes we can think to ourselves, well, it can't be me, so it must be them. And another reason besides an aversion to sin could simply be that we can have the assumption, which I've spoken a lot about, that we are more conscious than others. How do we know? Really, how do we know? There's this other Bible verse that says that you have to become a fool if you want to be wise. Even if you think you're wise in your own eyes, you have to first become a fool again, and you have to kind of relearn, okay? So you have to unlearn what you think you know to relearn. So this really should place all of us in a perpetual state of being humble, and in a perpetual state mentally of being a student of life. And you don't really get that vibe, do you? Out in the world, in our modern culture, I sure don't. So, anyway, there's a lot of reasons why I think we, even if we genuinely try to evaluate the situation and say, is it really me? How do we really know what our part really is or is not in the situation? Okay? Now, that being said, it's important to trust ourselves. It's kind of like, how can you now? How can you possibly trust yourself when you've just established that, it's impossible for you to know your part in the situation, or, you may be blind to certain aspects of yourself or whatever. That's true. And this is where I've spoken about this before. I think if we can get to a place of being comfortable, somewhat comfortable even, with two or more things being true at once, I think that there's probably a lot more truth in that than anything else. And that's not to say that some people aren't just really, truly wrong sometimes, because without any other party being a part of it. That's very, very true. But what I'm trying to get at here is the place of freedom. The place where you don't even you can get to a place where you can choose to not even bring judgment into a situation at all. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Okay? And so there's another verse. Cast your cares upon me. I don't know if it says upon me or upon him. God. All right? And so that's what we really need to strive for. And I think that human wisdom is something that is revered, and I don't think it's just a modern type thing. I think it's been that way all throughout time. And just wanting answers to all these questions, like definitive answers. And essentially, the only one who's going to have the ultimate, fully correct answer to anything is God. And, I think that's, again, going straight back to the Garden of Eden. That was the whole warning to Adam and Eve, not to eat of the knowledge of good and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so, I haven't had much coffee yet this morning, so excuse me, y'all. I'm still kind of waking up. It takes me a while some days. So, that's where we get all mixed up right there. And it's kind of like, I think we think we need a reason, a definitive, logical reason to make decisions. And sometimes maybe that's true, but I'm talking about relationally, okay? And I think that when we surrender that need, we're in a much better place. Especially if we just simply say, I don't have it all figured out, but I just feel that something isn't right here. This is where, thank goodness, many people do trust their gut, their intuition. And a lot of people consider that a higher knowledge, a sixth sense, or just cues from your subconscious trying to come through and break through to your conscious awareness. But they're like nudges from your capital H higher self, your capital S self, your higher self. Just nudges trying to come through to your conscious awareness, and yet they don't quite make it there, so there's no logic to apply. And a lot of people can cause friction against this process by saying, oh, well, you're just acting by your feelings, and that's like shamed or whatever. But the truth is, per my experience anyway, at least at this point, on my path and my walk, is that there's a whole lot more peace that you can find and partake in if you don't try to figure it all out. If you just simply say, I can see the faults in this other person, and I can see the faults in myself, and I'm not going to sit here and engage in comparison. There's no good fruit that could come from that. And I'm not going to cast judgment on them or on me. I'm simply going to, register all of this as lessons, and I'm going to let God deal with, each of us, which he will anyway, and I'm fine with that, and I'm going to just simply act on, what's good for me. So, in terms of the actual label or word judgment, there's a couple of different ways to look at it. First of all, judgment as in deeming someone wrong. And then there's judgment as in having good judgment, okay? Like, for example, let's just say an herbalist, okay? These herbs that God gave us are medicinal, and you have to have good judgment as to what's helpful and what's harmful. And it's the same way with medicine, just pharmaceutical type medicine or whatever, and so many other things in life too. So I'm just trying to, talk about the concept of having good judgment. And so it's not necessarily about labeling good or bad, okay? It's also about the specifics. How much of this is good? How much of this is better for the situation at hand? How much of this is harmful for this person's body weight and age and circumstances, and other medicines are taken? So that's what I perceive as good judgment, but it's so intricate, right? And that is founded on, a lot of times, I would say, most of the time even probably, on things right? Wisdom and knowledge. And so, and I think the Bible, differentiates between wisdom and understanding as two different things. Wisdom is the principal thing, and with all you're getting of wisdom, get understanding. So you got to have that background of knowing what you're talking about anyway, to exercise that good judgment. And a lot of times we have to go through life and make a lot of mistakes to acquire the wisdom, so that we can then apply the judgment, the good judgment, And I think that that's really the way we need to approach relationships, is judging, is this relationship good for me? Not, is this person good or is this person bad? And they may be bad, but if you just leave that to God, then it's off you. The burden is off of you. And we're not supposed to do that anyway. Per the Bible, per the Christian Bible, right? And I'm not judging you if you do. It's to each their own. But this is just, how I feel about it. And yes, of course, there's a tree is known by the fruit it bears or whatever. But again, there's so many unknowns. And that's why I've always said only God knows a person's heart, truly. And a person can even present brash. A person can present very rude and inconsiderate. But we don't know the workings of their mind. And in that person's mind, they may not even realize they're coming off brash. And I'm thinking about people with different, I'm thinking of like autism, for example, and I don't know anything about this very much. I know some because I taught autistic children, but there are just different circumstances that we all have that make us who we are, and a lot of it we're not even conscious of. Again, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So it's like, why even get entangled in that? It's like the whole concept, the Native American concept of Watigo. And I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there's a whole book on it. And it's kind of like if you, even step into the realm of judgment whatsoever, you're caught up in it. Now you're just as bad as the rest of it. And that's just something that I don't want to be a part of. I don't want to be a part of it. And so we can look at it as, instead of judgment in that way and getting caught up in, being disgusted by how we were treated. And it may be valid. But what if we choose instead to acknowledge that and say, yeah, okay, this happened. Yeah, okay, this person did this, and I can't believe they did that. And I can't believe it affected me the way it did, and it, wrecked my life, or whatever it is. I mean, acknowledge it. I'm not saying avoid it, because what is it? What you resist persists. That's all true, I believe. So acknowledge it. Feel the feelings, even anger in a healthy way. But where you're going to pull back to and rest upon it, if you want to achieve peace. And this is termed a lot of different ways. One way would be letting go or giving it to God or whatever, but that's so short-sighted, And a lot of us, that kind of stuff just doesn't even register with us, because we need the depth of the explanation. We need that because we think in such detail that a simple, what's that called? Like a platitude? I could be totally wrong here. But a simple little saying like that is just not going to do it for us. It's going to fall short. It may even trigger us, because you're thinking, gosh, this person doesn't even know the complexity of the situation, or how could they say that? Well, they may already be going into all this detail in their mind and saying this short little, I'm going to say it again, platitude to you, thinking you're going to understand the complexity of it too. And, you may be thinking, you don't know for sure if this other person understands the complexity. So if you're the kind of person to pick it apart, like I am, clearly, then those kind of sentiments are going to fall short. They may be triggering. They may be felt and witnessed as dismissive. You may have just poured your whole heart out to who you thought was a close friend or family member, and they just come back at you with something like that. And you're like, really? But is there a saying, the devil's in the details? That just came to me, and I have no idea if that's even a legitimate saying. But I'm going to put it out there because it came to me. So, yeah, through that lens, there's always more opportunity to disagree and argue over all the different points if you lay them all out. That's true. And maybe that's why people just don't want to get into it. But but the point is remaining in that place of, I don't want to operate with judgment about others or even myself. Others can think they can see you clearly. And a lot of times, like when you feel misunderstood especially, that they don't. They don't. And I think that we suffer a lot because of that. And I think about, Jesus saying, if you're suffering, on your life journey, just know I've been there first. So he was very, very misunderstood, and it hurts to be misunderstood. It hurts a lot. It hurts for people. See, what happens when you're misunderstood? People have made a judgment about you, a quick, brash assumption, a judgment. Maybe not brash, maybe it was silent, but they make a quick judgment. And it goes back again. If you want to be wise, you have to first become a fool. You have to lay down everything you think you know. And really that just means you have to be in a perpetual state of being a learner, a seeker, a student, humble. So with some things, it doesn't matter how much you try, you're never going to reach an end point. You're never going to reach a final answer of ultimate finality. It's like this is it, this is the end. You're never going to get there with some things. And a great example of how this plays out in people, sometimes there are people who unfortunately play mind games, and I assume, which I don't like to do, that they know what they're doing. And sometimes there are signs, there are fruits showing you that they know what they're doing. But other times I don't think some people know, they're not aware that they're doing this. But these are called circular conversations sometimes. And there's another term for it, and I can't think of it right now. But it's kind of like where you're just going down this rabbit hole with this person. You're trying to follow a concept with somebody. And with most people, it's real easy. You just go back and forth and it's easy. But with some people, it's not easy. The whole relationship's not easy. It's difficult. It's draining. It feels like it sucks the life out of you. And when you start to become aware of it, you can be conscious of how your conversations go. And they're just all over the place. And you can never, they don't even make sense. And I think that when we're thinking about big existential type stuff, that's kind of how that goes. And we have to know where to draw the line sometimes. And we have to say, we don't have to, but if you want peace, I think we can just surrender that and say, you know what, I know enough. I don't have to know a lot. And the cool thing is, I don't have to determine who's the villain here and who's the victim here. I don't even have to do that. And I refuse to do that. And you can rest on the fact of, relationally now, okay, which is what we're talking about. You can rest on the fact of saying, this person's not good for me. Or this relationship's not good for me. So you have judgment, and then you have good judgment, where you can say, this whole situation isn't working for me. And that's all you need. That's literally all you need. There doesn't have to be someone who's wrong and someone who's right. And so many people get caught up in that. I mean, even like in just a business transaction, and even in sometimes it is clear cut. I mean, when you're talking about like lies or theft or, stuff like that, it's kind of clear cut. But I'm talking about relationally, okay? Where it's very complex and there's lots of conversations and situations and feelings and experiences and things like that. It gets difficult. And I think that keeping yourself healthy is enough. Wanting to keep yourself mentally healthy is enough to make a decision on continuing a relationship with someone or not. And what that does is that releases you from getting caught up into this watigo, this judgment, this evil. It just releases you from that. And it keeps you mindful of it too. And it has been a big blessing in my life to come to that point where I don't have to have it all figured out. And it's very humbling too. And yeah, I think that's it. We don't have to have all the answers. And it's really hard if you're someone who likes to research like me. You just have a natural tendency to try to find the answers, And the Bible says, knock on the door shall be open, seek and you shall find. And so and that's fine. If it's like a interesting topic to you, that's great. And but when it comes to relationships, why not err on the side of caution and be sure that we're not casting stones, and just be sure that we are just not trying to play God, and that we're just simply basing everything on, is this, good for me? Exercising good judgment. So I hope this has been interesting to you. I love to hear your thoughts if you feel called to share them. And thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.